In a multipolar world where the strongest power is broadly disinterested, yes, you're right, the UN really serves no purpose. We would need a new sort of institution, but it needs to be a talk shop. One of the things that we overreached for when we formed the UN was the idea that what the Security Council said would be law internationally. And that never really worked out because every country still has sovereignty. And if you want to do that, then you have to go there and militarily enforce it. And it did provide a nice little international law fig leaf for cover. But that's, as we're seeing with the Ukraine war, it's utterly useless at preventing conflicts when a major power is involved. So we need sort of a concert of powers negotiating forum. The only one of those we have at the moment is the G7, and those are countries that for most topics are broadly on the same side. We are not going to get a functional successor until the world has settled a little bit. So you're talking about at least 10 years from now when we can see who's going to be around when the dust settles, when the Germans and the Chinese and the Russians are no longer available to play those kinds of roles. I have a difficult time imagining what that sort of structure would look like because everything else is going to be defined by the relationship with the United States. And the United States probably is not going to see a huge benefit for building an institution that would be expressly designed to limit American options. It would be easier for us to just handle everything within our own institutions and bilateral talks. And I think that most of the countries that are going to partner with us, Australia, Japan, Mexico, and the United Kingdom at the top of the list, are going to see things more or less the same way. They have privileged access to Washington. They don't see the need to share that. At the risk of freaking out Americans, there are a number of cultures where bugs are just part of the diet, and some of them are industrialized. Mm-hmm. Like the Koreans love grasshoppers. I've had them. I can't say that I enjoyed the experience. But I think we've all traveled enough to have food that kind of scratches the itch or food that absolutely does not scratch the itch. Bug production is just animal protein by another name, and I would argue it's not any more environmentally friendly than most of our animal protein production. So I think, because I have not spent a lot of time thinking about bugs, that the argument is that because it uses a different input stream, that if we have a catastrophic failure in some other input stream, then we have a backup protein source. I don't think it's anything more sophisticated than that. And that's logical from my point of view. That doesn't mean I'm going to start eating Korean grasshoppers. Yeah, Lebanese food, it's like similar but different. Having a big plate of chicken livers put in front of you is intimidating until you try one. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, I can totally get on board with this. And this is a conversation that we're all going to be having in a few years. 80% of the world's foodstuffs are produced with imported inputs. And if you break down the input stream, you have a choice between either finding something else that is more appropriate to the inputs you can access or not eating. Now, in the United States, we're going to be fine because we're actually the source of not just the single largest chunk of agricultural production in the world, we're the source of a lot of the inputs too. So we are not going to have to wrestle with this overly, but a lot of the rest of the world, this is going to be part of their new normal. You guys, with your historical approach to things, and based on a lot of your questions, you might look like my third book, Disunited Nations. Mm-hmm. Because whereas End of the World goes through all the economic sectors and how we shape our world the way we do and where it's taking us, Disunited Nations does that for 11 countries, 6 of which are the ones that we know are going to be the global leaders, but really aren't, and 5 of which are the ones that are going to rise to the top. And just like with End of the World, it starts at the very beginning.
Whereas the League did not.
The difference between the interwar period and the Cold War period is that the United States decided to lead in the Cold War period. Whereas with World War I, we stepped in, we helped finish the war, but then rather than build a structure that would prevent the factors that created the war from reasserting themselves, we left, which guaranteed that those factors reinserted themselves. Right. And we got ourselves in another war. Now, looking forward, us backing away from the world, in my opinion, is strategically unwise because it will guarantee the creation of regional powers that will eventually challenge American interests. And we will have to do this all over again. But the people who believe my way, that engagement is the way you improve the human condition and ultimately guarantee American security, we have lost every presidential election 7 times in a row. And this last one, we didn't even have somebody on the ticket. So Americans, for the moment, do not agree with me. And that is taking us in the direction of the book. No, yeah, the United States, because its interests were, for the most part, in a different hemisphere. The kind way to put it would be that we were an unbiased participant, unbiased observer. The way the Europeans would call that arrogant, because we just didn't care about their baggage. And both are, I think, are accurate assessments.
Everybody else start marrying off their daughters to other leaders, and we have that's how we unify and keep wars from happening.
That worked out well.
Yes, it did. Every single time.
Well, the British princes are on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a lot of errors in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Well, I know that Prince Andrew had some international relations with some,
Well, a lot of it was not what I was expecting to see how the world was going to go. I felt that globalization was going to keep going ahead. That what's that Schwab guy's name?
Yeah, Klaus Schwab.
Klaus Schwab's. I keep thinking Peter Schwab.
I don't know why. Or
Klaus Schwab.
Charles Schwab.
When I see people like Klaus Schwab and many others, I'm eek. But it is kind of a bleak outlook to the third world, and not bad for the United States, not bad for the Western Hemisphere. I would hate to see some of our allies becoming some of our adversaries, so I hope it doesn't come to that. But I do like what he has to say about Red China. I love Taiwan. Really do not care much for Red China, and I would love to see their system collapse.
Yeah, me too, and I think a lot of the world would like to see that. With that collapse, though, it looks like it's going to be very detrimental just for the commoner out there, so that is not good. But that's the thing, when you try to control nature, and that's one of the things that he talks about in the book, and we talked about in the conversation, is you're trying to control how many children people are having, something that is very natural. It's a personal choice on how many children you want to have. And when you're having this one child act, how you couldn't see that you weren't going to have a really good replacement percentage on people going out and people coming in. Not a lot of force.